Welcome everybody to Where's Your Focus podcast. It's so nice to have you all here, whether you're joining us today or watching the replay. My name is Linda MELANSON, and
I'm Karen Alexander.
And, this is just a podcast where we discuss several different types of spiritual topics and, trying to bring awareness around different aspects of life that kind of gets not talked about enough, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
So what's going on with the Schumann's resonance? We like to start with this.
Yeah, we usually start with the Schumann's resonance. Yeah. So I went in this morning because a couple of, first of all, HeartMath, one of the sites that I go on, it only shows up to 2 days prior. So it only goes up to the 25th, but it's really interesting. Now, over the course of the last little while, we found that Saudi Arabia is flat, right? Like it was doing those flat spikes, and it's still flat. It's completely flat. There's not showing anything there. Alberta, I've got my notes behind you there, so that's why you'll see me looking back. Alberta has had, since the 19th, our last show was on the 20th, and Alberta's had a steady increase with very slight fluctuations. So it's going a little bit, but it's steadily being raising, right? And it hit a power of 102 on the 25th. Now, what's interesting is California, Lithuania, New Zealand, they all hit a highest power, their highest peak on the 25th. So that was 2 days ago. Right? So in California, they started off around the 19th, 20th at power of 58, sorry. That same day, they gradually moved to 69. And by the 25th, they were at their peak at 90. Lithuania, they started at 78. They increased to a power of 111. Then they went back down to 80. And then on the 24th, they went back up. And on the 25th, they hit 100. I think they were 102 on the 24th. And then New Zealand was kind of the same thing. But New Zealand was kind of like a wave. It peaked one day, then it bottomed out the next. Peaked again, bottomed out the next. So that's really interesting. Then in disclosurenews.it, we had, there was a lower frequency. I'm just going to move my screen there because I don't see enough. So yeah, which is the graphs that are shown now in Russia and Italy, they weren't the same at all, okay? They hit their peak on the 22nd. And at that point in Italy, there was no reports of any lightning or anything like that. But they went, in a 9-hour period, they went to a power of 3,000, down to 600, and up to 6,000. And that movement lasted for about 9 hours, and that was in Italy, but while Russia was not showing any significant changes. And as a matter of fact, it was lower than normal. So they were reporting around, where the Schumann's resonance is 7.83 hertz, they were reporting around 750, 7.60 hertz. So yeah, it's interesting, right? You think, pardon me?
There's action happening.
There's action happening. It's interesting to think that, so many places hit that spike at the same time. But in Russia and Italy, it was like 2 days, 3 days prior to it hitting here. Right?
Amazing. So they got the vibration first, and then it kind of made its way to us. Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty, it's interesting. It's interesting for sure.
It is.
Yeah. So what's going on with the moon? What's going on with the moon now?
Well, okay. So the moon cycle, we're going from a Cancer today into a Leo. So we're going from a phase of being very much in the home and comfortable in the home, very calm there. Maybe experiencing a little bit of anxiety getting towards the last bit of it here, because maybe we're just getting a little homebound now because the energy of the Leo is starting to come in. But going into the
Right.
Leo now, we're wanting to be a little bit more social. So we want to be connecting with others. This is a time too where we might be a little bit more sensitive to criticism. So just keep an eye out for
Ooh,
that,
okay.
because I apparently
Triggers.
the triggers, exactly. We like triggers. So
Yeah.
we're coming into a time when we want to be maybe shining in our gifts a little bit more, and so we might want to be connecting to others, but show off who we are a little bit. So that's going to be for the next 3 days.
Okay.
On Saturday, we're switching into Virgo. So once we switch into Virgo, we're going to be switching into a need of, like, we might be wanting to clean and organize a little more than normal. So, but try not to get bogged down with the idea that everything has to be perfect. And I guess that moon influence can really get to you in that way, is everything has to be perfect. So yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
I love to hear about what's going on with the moon. It's not something that I pay attention a whole lot to myself. So when I hear it from you, it's interesting. Mhm.
Well, and we're in the full moon is tomorrow. We're in the full moon phase
Yay,
right
yeah.
now.
Yeah.
So we're already in the full moon phase. So the full moon phase is into Leo. So that it just increases that need for social aspects, and maybe wanting to show off parts of our personality a little bit more, because that moon is full. So that influence is going to be a little stronger than it might if we were in a new moon in Leo. So
Right. And great time, guys, to get out your crystals, to get all the cleansing done there. If you want to put some water out to get the moon's energy in your water, there's so much that we can do with the full moon, right? Well, with the moon anyway, but the full moon, the energy is just beautiful.
the full
Yeah, yeah.
is. And even I was speaking about this in my class today, is about putting crystals in your water and letting it sit out overnight in the moon. If you want to empower your water with certain types of vibrations from the crystals, it's a great time to do it too.
It is, absolutely. Just be careful with your crystals, knowing that some crystals don't like water, so you don't want to put them in there. But yeah, anything like quartz or anything like that, you're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So what you can expect, I forgot to put my iPad on do not disturb again, so I'm going to get all kinds of things. You're going to see my eyes rolling here as things come in. Sorry. So what to expect today? So what we're going to talk about, we're going to start out with the history of the belief surrounding death and how that changed over the years, right? From there, we're going to get into the process of death itself, and we're going to touch a little bit on the afterlife as well. We're also going to see if anybody comes in with questions. We're going to try to answer the questions right at the end of the session, okay? Right at the end of the podcast. So the first thing we're going to start with, did you have anything else, Linda, at all? Or you were good?
We're good.
Okay.
I'm good to go.
So the first thing I see, I have my oh my God, I can't remember what it's called. What is it, Linda?
I don't know.
Oh my goodness, that's terrible. I can't remember what it's called. It'll come to me after a while. But anyway, I have it in front of me because it blocks the EMF, right? From the.
Oh, yes.
I cannot remember what it's called. Well, isn't that terrible? It's
Mm.
Michelin Gaudette that sells them. And it comes from Russia, I believe. Oh, it'll come to me after a while. So where we're going to start is the history of the belief in death, right? And how everything was formed. So if we look at the history of the belief surrounding death, the oldest form of Western culture is where they believe that everybody went to the same place. Everybody, I feel like this camera's really close to me, so I'm just going to move it back a little bit. Everybody went to the same place. So everybody went to this place that they called Hades. And what happened there, this was just a boring and uninteresting place that everybody just went, and that's where they spent the rest of eternity. Okay. So there was nothing special there, but that's what they believed. But then as time went on, people started to believe, well, that's not fair. Like that, that doesn't make sense. There's got to be, for everybody to go to the same place. I mean, there's good people, there's bad people or cruel people. It's not fair that they all go to the same place, right? So, and if God oversees everything, then there's got to be some kind of justice, right? So they came up with the idea that the virtuous, if you lived, your life well, and you followed God and everything, well, then you were going to be rewarded at the end. But if you didn't, if you were cruel, then you were going to be punished. So at the same time, in Israel, they believed that when you died, you just went to your grave. There was nothing. And they believed that God oversaw everything, so that they focused on life itself. Well, what happened in Israel was all of these disasters started happening. And so the Israelites thought, well, how can that be? Like, how can that be, if God is overseeing us, that all of this stuff is happening to our place, and all these financial crises and education, everything that just went down. I don't know about education, but everything that just went down. And how could that happen, right? If God was really looking after us, how could he see his people dying? How could he see the wars? How could all that happen? And so then what happened was the Hebrew prophets came up with an idea that God had a plan, and God was going to resurrect Israel. But it was going to resurrect Israel as a nation, right? The whole nation of Israel was going to be resurrected. So from there, if you look at the Old Testament, like right towards the end of the Old Testament, the belief was that it was not the nation that was going to be resurrected. It was going to be the individuals themselves. So people were going to be resurrected, right? And the belief was that there was going to be a future judgment day. God would come and intervene, and those people who had done evil or whatever were going to be made accountable, right? And that the dead were going to be raised, and they were going to live in this heaven on earth, and the bad were going to be alienated, right? So wherever they were going to go, they were just going to be alienated. And then was the time around Jesus, right? And what Jesus had said, and he came up with that same thing. He said that was all going to happen soon, though. That, God was going to intervene because evil had taken over the world, and the good were going to be rewarded and the bad were going to be punished with this alienation. But time passed, and years passed, and it didn't happen, right? So generations were passing as all of this was happening, because, you're talking about 2,000 years ago. And as all of these generations passed, they thought, well, it's not happening the way it was, so it must not be right. There's got to be another way. So they had to reevaluate this whole judgment and death thing. And that's when they came up with, okay, so if the good are going to be rewarded and the bad are going to be punished, it has to happen in death. So the good must go to heaven, where Jesus went to live with God, right? And the bad must be punished or tormented, right? But it wasn't only going to be alienated at that time. That's when heaven and hell was born, because the bad then were going to be tormented in hell for all of eternity, and the good were going to live in heaven for all of eternity. So that's kind of how heaven and hell started out, right? But at that time, people didn't know what happened at death. They didn't know what was going on. All they knew was these bodies were now dead, right? Well, in the past 200 years, we've had a lot of medical advancements, especially in the last little while, right? And so now what's happening is, with the medical field, as long as it's been as far ahead as it's come, when people die now, they don't always, there's been a lot of near-death experiences, right? So a lot of people have come back. And so now we're starting to get to the science of it, of what happens in death and what the process of death actually is. And I did a very, I subscribed to a website. It's called scribd.com, CRIBD.com. It's not expensive. It's got books and audiobooks and magazines and podcasts and music, sheet music, everything on there, right? And it's not really expensive. It's like, we looked at it yesterday. What was it, Linda? $11.25 or $11.75 a month, something like that. Yeah.
A month.
So what I did, I was reading about death because, you know, we were talking about this yesterday as well, how nice it is for us to be doing this on a weekly basis because it kind of drives us as well to learn more, right? So I was reading some books and listening to some audiobooks on death and what was happening. And I found a book that was called Evidence of Afterlife, The Science of Near-Death Experiences. And it was written by Jeffrey Long. And what happened in the book was he actually compared the results of some studies that were given, or some surveys, I guess, that were given to people who had near-death experiences. And what they found when they or what he found when he compared the results was that there are 12 elements that happen in somebody who's experienced a near death, who's had a near death experience. And those 12 elements, they don't always happen. It's not always the 12 elements that happen to any one person. Some of them have had 12, some of them have had 10, whatever, but the order is always consistent. And so that's what we're going to look at today, because that's what we, as in our discussion yesterday, we talked about how this would be the process of death, right? Now, we don't get to the end, of course, because those people come back to their bodies. So we only get so far in the process of death. But after that, I mean, Linda's done past life regressions. I've done past life regressions. So we've gotten a little bit more from there as well, right? So if we look at those 12 elements that Jeffrey Long had put together, the first one starts out with that out-of-body experience. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about each one of the elements, and then we'll start with the out-of-body experience, and then we'll come back and go on to the second one. Is that okay with you, Linda?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay. So the first one is the out-of-body experience, right? When somebody dies, they always talk about how they've had this, they leave their body.
Yeah.
Right.
And then once they leave their body, we talked about this, is they have the heightened sense, right? Or is that already going into the second?
No, that's fine. Yep, that's fine.
Yeah. So the leaving the body and being able to see exactly what's happening in the room after their body is pronounced dead. And being able to see the people that are working on them. This is consistent. We see this happening every single time. And also that heightened sense. So they're able to like hear things that are happening further away. And it is the beginning time of when they start to have that heightened sense of euphoria feeling. They're just starting to connect to that feeling of euphoria too.
Exactly. And in one of the books that I read, it actually talked about this woman who had she was on the operating table and she was pronounced dead. And excuse me. And I guess she, with this heightened sense, she actually heard the conversation that her husband had with the doctor, or the doctor had with her husband, which was out of the room and down the hallway, like 40 feet away, right? So her heightened sense of her ability to hear what was happening when she was in that room, I mean, that's just remarkable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's one of the things. And then, like you say, we get into that intense emotion, that those intense feelings of what's described as pure love.
That's right.
And then,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Well, that starts right away, right? So it's not something that,
exactly.
Yeah, it's not like once you see the light in the tunnel, which we'll talk about that, but that sense, that release of the body, the density of the body feeling goes away, and you're automatically in this feeling of connection and euphoria, even while you're still in the earth plane.
Right. And you know, Belinda, I don't know if you've spent any time with, well, yeah, I know you've spent time with somebody as they died, but I know I was there with my mom when she passed away, and she suffered, God love her heart, she suffered so much. But at the end, when she was ready to go, her whole face changed, even before she died, right? Her whole face changed, and she looked more like mom again. And she had this smile on her face. So I'm, you know, that feeling that might even hit us just seconds or the last couple of breaths before we leave the body. right? It has to. It,
And yeah, sorry, I hate to interrupt, but I've also read
that's
a lot
okay.
of accounts that when we're going through a lot of pain or there's a lot of suffering right at the end, we completely disconnect from all of it. Like that you won't have that sense. You'll see it happening, but you won't feel it. So you're already like disconnecting from the physical aspects of what's actually taking your life.
Absolutely. And absolutely. We were talking yesterday about how much I say absolutely. Sorry, guys. It's a habit. But yeah, so it was like, I think it was like her last three breaths. And at that point, if you've ever been with anybody who's dying, and like I say, Linda, I know who you have, but their last breaths that they take are, there's like, there can be like 30 seconds and a minute in between breaths, right? So that last 4 or 5 minutes of her life, she had that smile on her face. And that, that's what made me think, well, wow, that's, yeah. So you've just confirmed that. Thank you. That's good.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so from then we go into, like you said, the passing through or into a tunnel,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that's when we see that light,
And everybody is
brilliant
drawn to the
mystical
light,
light.
like you
Yeah,
just want to be one with that light again. That's why it's so. And the tunnel, you can't help but wonder, is that like a wormhole? Like, are we running through a wormhole to get to
exactly,
a different reality, right? Like that's what goes through my head when
absolutely.
I hear tunnel. So
Makes sense, right? It
mhm.
makes sense. And then we get into the the presence of other beings, and then sometimes that's happened as well while people are still alive, right, where they'll see people who have already passed on, like their relatives or friends or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's another stage,
Yep.
or
Where
mystical beings.
exactly. And one thing that was consistent with everything that you had read in that study, where they studied so many different NDEs, and then the ones that I studied, they all felt the presence of a divine being, one divine being coming to them and communicating with them
Right,
without words. Um, and so they would connect with this divine being and then take them right into a life review.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
And during that life review, then there was that sense of the alteration of time, right?
that's right. Yes, it was all happening so fast. And you can see, like, these people have these great stories, like these recounts of, it seems like it would take so long and they were only dead for maybe 30 minutes at most,
Yeah,
and some even less than that. And
yeah.
so
Some even a minute or two, right?
yeah, their awareness expands so much in such a short period of time. And so the life review is when you're viewing how you personally have affected other people, but from their point of view. So you're feeling the emotions and the feelings you've caused everybody to feel in your life. And they do this,
Absolutely.
yeah, they do this so that your spirit can know how others have felt about you. So what kind of life have you lived, really,
Mhm.
right?
And we talked about that as the lead into the empaths, right? When we talked about empaths at the last session, at the last podcast, we talked about how with this, what happens when we come back to the next life, which I'm getting ahead of time here, but it kind of teaches us of how to be more empathetic. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that sense of alteration of time, then we go right into the life review, which is again where what you just explained. And then we, did you want to do any more on the life review, Linda? Was there anything else you wanted to say there?
The only thing that I would add was the particular man that I studied. He had three near death experiences, and every time
Mm,
he was becoming more and more understanding exactly the aspects of how to bring heaven on earth. That's what it was all about. And one of the things that he talked about was in this life review, the biggest aspect was the forgiveness work. And it's not about forgiving others, it's about forgiving yourself. And if you think about it, even when you're asking forgiveness from others, you're really only getting permission to forgive yourself
That's right.
and
That's right.
truly forgive yourself for the things that you've done to others,
That's right.
the type of life that you've lived, right?
Yeah, for sure. For
Mhm.
sure. The other thing that happens, or what NDers have said, is that they see unworldly or heavenly realms. So they see actual different dimensions while they're in that state, right? While they've left their body. And
Mhm.
so their consciousness is just viewing other unworldly or heavenly realms.
Yep. And I thought this is really interesting too. He spoke about how if he would focus on the beings that were up higher, he could feel his energy moving up higher with those beings. But if he focused on the beings that were lower, he could feel his energy going down, like kind of shrinking and moving down with those energy. I thought that was so amazing. And we'll talk more.
So interesting. And in one of the books that I read, and I can't remember what the name of it was, and I don't even remember who the author was, but she gave an example of this woman who was there, I'm probably getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but you're talking about the vibration, so it kind of came to my mind. And she had passed on, and this woman was going to help her to go to the light, right? And she was kind of stuck because she was with other women who were just there busy gossiping and not kind of paying attention to anything, so they were very much lower vibration, and they didn't want her to leave. They wanted her to stay there with them. Thank goodness she said, she realized, and she said no, and she left, and this lady who had written the book had gotten her to go to the light without any issues, right? But that's just an example of what happens. Yeah, yeah.
That's right.
And the other thing that everybody always says with near death experiences is that they come back with a special knowledge. They always learn something while they're there in that very short period of time, which might only be an hour time, might only be a minute or 2 minutes, but for them it could be hours, right? Because of that alteration of time. And they come back with something that they didn't know, something that and they're now, like you say, taking it to this lifetime to change and to help this world raise in vibration so that we can be, living
And
in a higher vibration.
it's about
Pardon
bringing
me?
it's about bringing heaven on earth. Um,
Heaven on earth.
yeah, there
Exactly.
there was one thing that you had said about it's gone now. It's okay. It's
Oh
okay.
no.
It triggered a thought, but now it's gone. It's not a big deal. Okay, let's keep going.
Sorry. Yeah. So from that point, then this is the people with near death experiences, because if people die, they don't get the face that, well, some of them do, I guess. What happens next is the 11th element is facing some kind of a barrier or some kind of a boundary that either they have a choice to come back to their body or not, or sometimes they don't have a choice and they're told, some of the people who experience the near death, they've said, well, I was told that I had to go back. One lady said, I was told I had to go back because I had a child that had to be raised. Why she had to go back to raise the child, there may have been other people there to raise the child, but the child would have been raised differently. It had to be raised by her, right? So she had to go back in order for that child to fulfill what was supposed to happen in his life or her life on earth. And she wasn't given a choice. She had no choice but go back. But others were told that they had the choice. They must have fulfilled what they were supposed to do here on earth. So they had the choice to either stay or go back,
And
right?
with the new knowledge that they gained,
And
they would have a new mission, a new thing to bring. I remember what I was going to say. There is no time here in this realm. There's no
right.
past, there's no
Yeah.
future. There's just right now and all knowledge that past and future can ever engulf. And that's hard for us because we are programmed to see time as linear, that we're going on this path. So it's really hard for us to imagine a place of no, but when we can really let go of that, then our energy is able to take on information very quickly, because there's no barrier, there's no mind that has to wrap around it, like it
Exactly.
just, you absorb it and it's done. So,
Mhm. Yeah. And I mean, realistically, time was only invented because we had to have some form of measure if there was going to be meetings or for things to happen, like for something to start and something to finish, there had to be some form of measure, right? And that's why time came into play. And I don't know when that happened. Linda, do you know when that happened?
I do not
No
have
idea, right?
any clue.
No, no, I have no idea when the hourly clock kind of came into play. That'd be interesting to learn about that. But yeah, so yeah, there is no, everything is happening simultaneously, right?
That's right.
So yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
So at that point, for the near-death experience people, if they didn't die, which they didn't because they came back, that's when they returned to their physical body.
Mhm.
But we can learn other things. That's all we can learn from the people who experience the near death. But we can learn other things by doing the hypnosis
Absolutely.
and right, because those
Yep.
people that we hypnotize, we can take them in between lives and we can take them to different sections of what happened during that time.
Yep.
So I don't know if you want to get into a little bit, Linda, about we talked about purgatory and some different things.
Yes. So, so the idea of heaven and hell is, clearly we've debunked that. There is no hell. Hell is created by your experience of reliving a traumatic emotion or a habit that you don't, that you haven't, you're not able to disconnect from yet. And if you've been following, I kind of talk about, we have like we have the spirit that lives with the one. The spirit connects with the soul chip. The soul chip connects, is recording your whole life here on the planet, and that is what connects you into your body. So we have these three layers. The soul chip and the soul, after it comes out of the body, the spirit sometimes gets confused because it's trapped into this torment cycle, and
Mhm.
it doesn't separate. And so this is that lower energy. It can be called purgatory. That's the word that I use for it. But it's
Mhm.
that in between place. Now, the second awareness comes into that place of suffering, we disconnect and move on. So, but we have to come to that awareness that we want something different. So
Mhm.
then we can disconnect and we can move on. What else were we
Absolutely.
gonna? I forget what else. My
We
brain
were
is.
just taught the soul chip and then crossing over, and then the rebirth was happening after that, right? But the bottom line here is that, we can look at the Bible, but the Bible was written by humans, right? So when the Bible is written, when something is written by humans, there's mistakes, right? For heaven and health for heaven and hell to have altered so much over the years, we know that there's bias, there's cultural conditioning there that put all of that stuff into place, right?
And we
And
have
so now,
when the Bible was written too, we didn't have the science that we have today that's able to bring people back to life. When people died back then, they were dead.
absolutely,
They couldn't come back and tell you what happened.
what had happened
Exactly.
exactly,
And so
exactly.
now we have
So
science
yeah,
study where we can look at lots of people who have gone through this experience.
right. And so the bottom line is that death is not final, right? The death as we experience is the death of our physical body. It's not the death of our consciousness,
Yeah.
because our consciousness moves on. That's been proven over and over again with people who have gone through near life experience, near death experiences. Sorry, right?
Mhm.
And then it even comes into the point, Linda, where, and we didn't have this conversation, it just kind of came to my mind, and I'm sure you've heard of it before, but there have been people who, even small people like children, who've come to their parents and said, I used to be another person before.
Absolutely. Mhm. Yeah.
right? And there was one little guy that I had read about, and he was not very old. He was, I don't want to say an age because I'm not sure, but he was definitely under 10, and he had been murdered. And he actually told his parents who murdered him and what he looked like and what town he was in. And they actually arrested the guy who had murdered this child before in his past life.
That's,
Now I'd have to go back to find the details because this was read a while back, right? And I was like, wow, that's
that,
crazy.
that is
And
incredible.
when you do, I mean, it is. And when you do past life regression, right? I've done past life regression with clients, and I've had clients who've come back and said, and we're getting into the afterlife here, but I've had clients who've come back and actually explained what happened and how they were murdered, or what happened in their life. And this one in particular, she wasn't murdered, but she came back and she had such detail, and it was in the 1800s, and she had been somebody who was somebody kind of thing, right? So we, and what we did after was we actually did a search on the internet, and we found out, and the things that we looked for, her name, she said she had been in an orphanage. She was running the orphanage because there was all these little children around, and she was helping put them to bed, and then she was sitting at her desk and she was waiting. And I asked her what her name was, and she said, well, the children call me Mother Margaret. And then she died in 1881, and so we went and looked it up, and we actually found her in Louisiana, in the States. So, she would not have known all those details. I mean, there was a detail about a cross and how she had this cross that she would keep a hold of, but she wasn't sure why. So all the memories don't necessarily come back, right? But she had this cross. She just knew it was very important to her. And when we looked it up, the Pope had given Mother Margaret a cross, a crucifix that she kept with her all the time. So there's so much that we've learned through people who've had near-death experiences and doing past life regression.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, I've had to take people through the life review process again, and do some healing there because they were not able to forgive themselves for some of the things that they've seen. That's happened a couple times. And
Right.
it's not something to get bogged down on, but it is something to be aware of that, when we do cross over, we are looking at the perspective, and that's why we care so much about what other people think.
Absolutely.
Like that's why we can feel what other people are feeling, so we can forgive ourselves, learn, and move forward now. We don't have to wait to do that life review. And so, we have that power. And another aspect that we wanted to talk about too was sometimes we die and we are so used to living a habit, or we've died so suddenly we don't realize that
Mm.
we died, that we continue living a reality here in the plane of the earth, right? And when that happens,
Mhm.
this is when we have entities. Some of these entities, they want to be here. Okay, so they want to be living amongst the living. And then others, they don't realize that they've passed, and they are just living a routine, a habit that they've lived their whole lives. And sometimes, if you're very sensitive, you can come across these people or beings. And if this does happen, it's not outside of your ability. You can call Archangel Michael down to help these people back to the light. A lot of times they want to be held back to the light. If you're becoming aware of it, that means that there's something in their head that's saying, you know what, maybe something a little bit different here would be better. And so if that
Exactly.
awareness, that means that they want other people to be aware that they're there, and that, you can help them over at that point. And just knowing
Exactly.
that we have the ability to help these souls get back to the light so that they can continue their evolutionary process is really important. And then there's some souls that they don't want to go, but sometimes you have to pull it down and force them back. I had an experience once, a friend, and I've never really talked much about this, but when I first started helping souls cross over to the light, I went, one of my good friends, her dad passed away, and I was home visiting, and we were watching a movie, scary movie at her house. And to say that his presence walked into the room, I could hear the wrinkles as he sat down on his chair in that living room, like the wrinkles in the chair. And I was like, instantly, I was like calling, and I started to get this like very anxious feeling. And and his words were, "I'm not ready to go. They still need my presence. Don't force me."
Mm.
And I said, okay, but I've been there several times. He's gone now, but it's almost like he knew. And as soon as I started, and he made it very aware, I started to get this really heavy, like, and it was like, no, I'm not ready. Don't do this right now. And it was just an
Wow.
interesting experience, but it's just to give you an idea that these beings, sometimes they're not ready to go to the light, and they won't go through the tunnel until they're done what they're here to do.
Yeah. And you said some of them don't even realize that they're dead at some point, right? And which reminds me of the movie, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen that movie, The Sixth Sense, right?
Absolutely.
Where Bruce Willis was he was some kind of a therapist or something in there, and he didn't realize he was dead, right? And then the other one that brings it to mind, Linda, when we talk about calling in Archangel Michael to help somebody who's passed on, and I know you've done that quite often.
Yeah.
It reminds me of what was the name of that show with what was her name? The dark hair, the long dark hair, cute
The
little woman
ghost
she was.
whisperer. The ghost whisperer.
Ghost whisperer.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, because that's what she did all the time, right?
Mhm.
And people watch those things and think, oh, that's not real, that's not real. But when you experience it, it is so very real.
It's real. The very, very, very first time that I ever experienced something like that, I was living in a basement apartment, and I was traveling to BC. I was living in Edmonton, Alberta. I was traveling to BC for a wedding, and on the way there, I bought the Ghost Stories of BC book to read. And I wasn't one that, it's not that I didn't believe at that point. It just, I thought it was a good storybook. And when I got back home living in the basement, I read that last story, and it was about a kid. Okay. So anyways, it was a child that was in this place and whatever. So I finished the story, closed the book, turned the light off, and I pull my blankets up. I'm the only person in the house. And just as I'm about to fall asleep, I hear like the pitter patter of the feet going across the floor upstairs. Now I'm the only person in the house. And so I got really freaked out. I turned all the lights on, but for weeks after, I was decorating a room in my house, and it just turned out to look like a kid's room. And every time I went in this room, there was always something off. Either the picture would be really crooked, or either the drawer would be. And then one day I couldn't get my stuff together trying to go to school. And there was this radio show I was listening to about this girl who channels angels and all this. And by the time I found all my stuff, I got in my car. I was like, I'm still listening to this radio show because I was really into it anyway. At the last one they talked about is helping souls cross over and asking Archangel Michael to come down and help them back to the light. That's great. So every time I would get that feeling that there was a presence there, I would do this, asking. And then all of a sudden you just felt it. Like you just knew the presence was there. And I saw this, and in my meditation, I saw that little child, I don't know how old, it might have been 4, maybe 5, run back and say, "You're gonna find love," and then ran off with them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that was a powerful experience. And then I've gone on to, death doesn't scare me. It doesn't, and that's something I
No.
really wanted to talk about too, is how death is used to control people. And it's
Oh,
kind of what we're going through right now. Not to say that we don't have this virus and that we don't have these things to be worried about, but don't let the idea of death keep you closed up
I'm living.
and scared of life. It's so important to wrap your mind around this aspect, because the only thing that really changes is your current circumstances, and you move into a place of love that's so whole and so complete that really you don't miss anything. You know, a lot of people, once they get over there, they don't want to come back to the earth experience. It's very dense, very heavy experience that we're having right now. So to be scared of death, it's not something, and even your loved ones, a lot of times we live many lives with them. They come back and we do things over and over again with the same people, and you have your soul people, your soul family, and so we live like many different aspects with that different, like that soul family. That could be your daughter, could be your mother, your grandmother, your husband, your, you know, it changes in so many different ways. So death is not something to hold you back.
It's not final.
It's
Death
not.
is not final,
Mhm.
right? There's not a finality there. And now when you were talking, I had a thought and it's gone again now. Oh, I know what it was. That lady that I was talking about earlier, how she was told, no, you have to go back because you have to raise that child. You can imagine the love that you have for your child. If you have a child, you know what kind of love that is. There's just nothing like it, right? But she didn't want to leave. She didn't want to go back. So imagine the love that she felt in order to be able to give up that love,
That's right.
right? Like there, it just has to be so extraordinary, so amazing for people not to want to come back, but
That's
to feel they have to, right?
right.
So, and I'm sure it's different for everybody. I mean, there's going to be some of the same elements, like we said, but it's different for everybody for sure. But to know that there's that kind of pure love there, that and you know, here on earth sometimes we'll get little sparks of it, right?
We
We
do.
will.
It's like the idea, you know, when you first start falling in love with somebody and you can feel that you're cherished, you have that unconditional connection, and you know, you have a little spout. Like when I first had my daughter, I felt the same way. It was like, oh my gosh, I had so much love from this person and gave so much love to this person that I couldn't fathom. Like, why didn't I have a kid sooner? Like, why was I holding
Mhm.
this experience back from myself? But at the same time, when you go into the afterlife, it's like 50 times more intense than that.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we're speaking from obviously we neither one of us, or at least I didn't have any kind of near death experience. So we're going on other people, right? And what we've read and what we've watched and what we've listened to. So we're going on those experiences for sure. But I mean, it all comes back to the same thing. Like those 12 elements happen in the process of death. So if that happens, then it's not final. Our consciousness leaves our physical body, right?
Yeah.
There's no ands, ifs, or buts. I mean, science has proven that over and over again now.
Yeah.
And with near death experiences, with hypnosis. So it's pretty amazing. It's
Hmm.
pretty amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the next slide, we talked a little bit about afterlife, not a whole lot. But that's going to be our topic for the next series, next podcast, right, Linda? We had talked about yesterday. We said we were going to do afterlife on
The
the
next.
next podcast. So that'll be in a week's time. Um, I'd like to do a shout out today, though, and I'd like to shout out Patricia Callahan. Patricia's from here in Moncton, and she's just started doing, she does readings, she does card readings, and she's got several different packages of cards that she uses, and she uses her intuition to choose which cards she uses for her readings. And she's just started doing readings online. So she charges, I think it's $60 that her fee is, and you'll have to check that with her for sure. But we'll put a link in the in the bottom of the this podcast to let you know how you can reach Patricia if you are interested in that. And what was the other thing? Oh, we were going to have a look and see if there was any questions, Linda. We got about 10 minutes left.
Well,
So
there's
if you
one
want to go ahead and
question.
do some chatting,
Yeah, there's one question
I'm
here
going.
from Judy Payne, and she was asking about shungite. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I'm not
that
familiar
is,
with shungite.
this is Shungite.
Oh, that's
Remember
shungite.
I
Okay,
remember
there.
I had said it'll come to me and then I forgot about it. Thank you, Judy. That's exactly what it is, Shungite. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I didn't know what
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I'm just going through to see if there's any questions at all. I don't see any questions here. So, but yeah, so just, yeah, so we don't have any questions.
no
That's
question.
it.
That's it.
No questions. That's it. So we're a little bit early today. Did we have anything else that we wanted to talk about? Did you have anything else that you wanted to share with us or?
Well, I have an aromatherapy first aid class that I'm doing tomorrow. If you'd like to get into that, send me a quick message. I'm just going over 5 oils that are great to have in your
Yes.
first aid kit. That's it. Safely, how to use them safely, how to I like to keep things in the kitchen for when I'm cooking and different things, so we talk a little bit about that. So I have that class running tomorrow, and my new emotional fitness class, now that's is what I'm going to start calling it, because I'm going on my 4th round of teaching it, and it starts again this Saturday. So if you want to get
Right.
into that, I highly recommend, even if you're just sitting through it, it's a ton of information about just emotional wellness, how to use your emotions and connect your mind to your energy so that you're working as a coherent being, and using your emotions to learn and grow and upgrade these old, outdated ways of thinking that have been programmed in our DNA and in our energy. So that's what that class is all about. So if you're interested in that, please send me a message and I will get you into the messaging thread where I give all the links and everything when the class is running. But
Absolutely good. And just to let you all know, I'm going to take that class. Linda talks about it all the time. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go in and take that. I want to see what this is all about that you're doing in there.
I love it. I have
Oh,
so
so
much
that's
fun
going to be
every time.
fun.
Yeah, every time I teach it, I feel like new information comes out of me because I can sense what is going on in the people watching. So it's such an
Exactly.
amazing experience.
Yeah. And we've talked about that as well, how, when we deal with clients, when we work with clients, we learn so much ourselves. Like it's always a give and take, right? There's so much, and we'll never know everything. We'll never know
It,
everything there is to know.
you can't. There's no.
But keep trying, because keep learning, keep watching, keep paying attention, keep being aware of what's happening around you, and it's amazing the things that come to light.
It truly, truly, truly is. Like I can't
Mhm.
work with somebody without learning myself every single time. Especially
That's
doing the
right.
past life regression work, I found that that's where I really started to wrap my mind around a lot of subjects that were really hard to grasp, and but just understanding that human suffering actually has purpose. That was mind shattering for me. It was
It
like
was.
once it was like I was like, okay, now put it all back together again with that new information, because
Exactly.
we can get so bogged down by the things that are happening to us all the time that
Mhm.
we don't start to look at it from the point of view of, this is here to actually help me. This is here to actually help me to grow, think new thoughts and new ways of being and new ways of acting in the world. And once we look at it from that perspective, like those old perspectives, they fall fast.
They do.
They
Just
really
like
do.
that. Yeah.
Just like that.
Yeah.
And
And
not
those are what we call our triggers,
That's right.
right?
And not only that, once
Our
the energy
triggers. And so
system Yeah. Once the energy system is operating on that same wavelength, now we're creating a different world, a completely different world.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And we do both Linda and I do different types of therapies. So we kind of learn from each other as well, which is really nice. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I was going to say something else, Linda. It came to my mind, but now it's completely gone again. I don't remember what it was. Oh, I know what it was. So when I was doing the spiritual alignment connection, I was doing energy healing with clients on the table. And what was happening was they were actually going into a past life regression, and I didn't know how to deal with it. I had, because I didn't know anything about it. So that's why I went and started taking courses on past life regression and how to deal with forgiveness and all of that, so that I was better able to help the clients when that did happen.
And it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense, because that, like, all of your, and this is a quote that I have in my course, is you're not living in the past, but the past lives in you, right?
Yes.
It's in your energy field. So if somebody starts coming in and moving that energy around, automatically you're going to be put in that state where you are able to heal those past experiences. And that's really what that's one part of that we talk about a little bit in the course, is how those past lives, and also your DNA is also carrying information from
Yes.
your genealogical, your family line, and that is also playing a
Mhm.
role in your energy system. But it's all
Yes.
there for you to, the information, once you start to open those doors and take the lid off, the information just starts pouring out. I did one-on-one session with one of my students the other day, or yesterday, and he was just blown away. He couldn't believe it. Just like as soon as we opened the
Mhm.
door, by the evening, after 2 hours after the session, he's like, Linda, the information just is pouring in, and
Yeah,
it
because once you start moving, it's exactly right. And I mean, it's the same thing when I'm doing the moving the energy with the tuning forks, right? It's like we carry everything in our energy field, everything from this lifetime, from past lifetimes. I mean, I can go out about 10 inches off of your body, and I can find your ancestral line and any kind of diseases or anything that, any kind of trauma or anything that happened there. There's just it's undescribable. Like there's so everything is in our energy. And I did a past life regression myself, and it was really interesting because, like you say, we carry things in our DNA, but we also carry things from other lives into this life. And
absolutely.
things like I'll give you an idea. In another life, I grew up in a little town in France that was called Angers. And in this lifetime, I married a man. My first marriage was to a man by the name of Angers. His first name, his last name, his surname, right, was Angers. And there was other things like the same number of siblings I had in that lifetime, I had in this lifetime. So there's so many different things, and you can go, wow, like that's so wild, right?
Yeah,
So some things just carry over with you.
that's right. And the
It's and
really interesting thing about past lives and all of that is your current circumstances. So if we were to do a past life regression with you right now, you would only see circumstances in your past life that pertain to what you're experiencing right now. And that's
absolutely.
only because your energy field is creating your now. And so a lot of what you see is what you've carried from your past life into the now. And I talk a lot about the fragmented being in my course a lot, because a lot of times we become fragmented if there's trauma or something that's was very difficult for us to deal with in a past life. Our life now is going to start triggering you to pull that information and learn what you
Absolutely.
need to learn. And sometimes, if we can't go to the original trauma, you have to pick away at it. But when
Mhm.
we can go right into the original trauma, you learn all that you have to learn in one shot. But the now will trigger each section until you work through. That's why we keep saying, why does this keep happening to me? Why do I keep experiencing this? It's like I'm on replay.
Yeah,
But that's
because
why.
when we come to Earth, we come here with with an agenda. We come here to learn specific things. It's like a school, right? And if we're not learning it, then those things are going to keep coming back and keep coming back until we learn that lesson.
Yeah.
And if we don't learn it in this lifetime, we're coming back and have to do it again.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And that's exactly, Ashley is just saying she had a past life regression done with you and it was wild, she said.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
and
It
and
was
that's
pretty wild for
yeah,
sure.
yeah, and that's what it's all about, is starting to understand that we have a whole being. And again, and I tell everybody who is engaged in anything that I'm teaching or watching or anything, you have to thank yourself, because you have a body and a mind that is here to serve your higher self. Not everybody has that gift. It's a gift.
That's right.
It's not an easy path, but it's a gift. And you are
Mhm.
healing your whole being. You're bringing your whole being back to wholeness. That's what it's all about, right?
What it's all about. Yeah, that's it. So at the end of this, and I'll say it again, is that death is not final.
That is not.
So there's really not. I mean, a lot of people fear death, but really, if we know that it's only our human body that's going to die and our consciousness moves on, then there's not really death. It really doesn't exist, right?
Mhm.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, just a thought anyway. So we will be back in a week, and we will do have some discussions on the afterlife, which we kind of got into a little bit here. So, but there's always so much to talk about.
It really is.
So thank you everybody for watching,
Yes, thank you
and
so much.
we'll see you again in a week. Take
Bye.
care. Bye.